The Met Gala just happened in New York City, and you know who was missing from the red carpet? Diddy. He's in the courtroom making a major fashion choice. What will he wear for the duration of his trial in the Southern District of New York as he faces sex trafficking charges? Now, you might think I'm joking, but a defendant's looks actually matter at trial. Because let me tell you, jurors will be checking out everything about him, head to toe, including what he's wearing. I'm defense attorney Sara Azari, and here on Serving Justice, I talk to you about what really matters in a criminal case, the defense. Now, today we're going to look into this question. Can a defendant help their case, or at least not hurt their case, with their fashion choices, with their appearance in the courtroom and at trial? And specifically, what do we think of Diddy's looks as he faces sex trafficking charges in the Southern District of New York? Now, Diddy is not the first celebrity to swap their high glam for a more suitable, washed down look at trial that would win over the jury, perhaps. Let's bring in NewsNation reporter Safia Samee Ali to talk about some defendants with jaw-dropping courtroom high fashion, and also those that maybe dressed down a little bit and paired themselves with a prop, including a very big, shiny Walker. So, Sophia, what do you got for us today?
That was the perfect segue for me with the Walker, Sarah, because I was actually going to start with film producer Harvey Weinstein. So Weinstein walked into his 2020 sexual assault trial with a Walker. Now, nobody had seen him with a Walker before, so it came in pretty stark contrast to this Hollywood heavy hitter, strong, powerful persona that he had before getting arrested. So a lot of people thought that the Walker was sort of this bid for sympathy. In fact, Rose McGowan, actress Rose McGowan, who was one of his more outspoken accusers, said that it looked like he picked up some good acting tips when asked about the Walker. Now, Weinstein and his lawyer said the Walker was because he had just had back surgery and that those comments were mean-spirited and false. Nevertheless, Weinstein was eventually convicted of rape and sexual assault and sentenced in New York and California. That was, of course, later overturned.
Yeah, but Sophia, I don't care what the accusers say, like Rose McGowan, Jane Doe, 1 through 50, or however many he's had, because they're not the jurors, right? So when we're talking about a defendant's appearance and toning them down or amping them up or whatever we need to do as strategy, it's about how the jury's going to perceive them. We don't care about the accusers. And by the way, that Walker with all the shine and bling and stuff where he rolled in with it didn't really help him. He got convicted at the end. And then, of course, his conviction got overturned on appeal, but there's no jury on appeal. So anyway, what else do you have?
Yeah, so we've got Bill Cosby. Now, during his 2016 sexual assault trial in Pennsylvania, Cosby walked in looking very disoriented. He stumbled going to court a couple times. And even though he was almost 80 years old, a lot of people said that his defense attorneys really played up his limitations and his age for the jury. In fact, days before the trial, his defense attorneys revealed that he's partially blind. And then they actually did use his blindness and his age to argue mitigating factors when he went to trial. He was also eventually convicted of aggravated indecent assault.
I see Cosby's case very analogous in this context to Weinstein. Although Cosby's older, his poor health was far poorer than Weinstein. And I don't think the defense really needed to do much. It was really visible that he was feeble and frail and blind and disoriented. And I don't think they needed to really have him amp it up or, act it out. I mean, that's really who he was. And it actually, I think it was to his benefit, even though he got convicted. I think it was to his benefit that maybe decades ago he's been accused of this horrific conduct, but is this man capable of doing that? So I thought that stark contrast was very natural with Cosby. But again, it doesn't, that's not how people get off, get acquitted. But I think it is really good strategy to really distinguish the person that's standing trial from the person that's been charged, So who else do we have?
Yeah, you made a really, really good point with those two examples. So I think I'll be curious to see what you think about the next two. So Lindsay Lohan. Now, she was charged with multiple things during the 2000s, including drunk driving and theft. And when she started going to her court hearings, she would initially show up in these really trendy outfits. there was this very infamous white dress, like this fitted mini dress and big sunglasses that she walked into court with. And a lot of people interpreted that as defiant and provocative. But as her legal journey continued, because she had many, many more hearings, she started dressing more conservative and demure and started wearing, big dark blazers. And she started putting on these long scarves.
She, her sort of the evolution of her look in the courtroom was always very interesting to me, and very, I think, very beneficial to her ultimately, because she was this wild, provocative, actress and big name at the time. She still is, but she was really in the news back then, and she was younger, and she was not compliant with the terms of her probation, which is why she kept getting dragged into that courtroom. And so, there was like drugs and alcohol and DUIs and just a domino effect of things that had to do with her not really honoring the court's orders about her terms of probation. And so as her looks evolved to me, and as she looked more mature, it seemed like she's taking it more seriously, that she is now going to comply with the court's order. This time I'm serious. I'm going to be a good girl. You're not going to see me in your courtroom again. So I thought her, the evolution of her looks was actually effective for her. And then I think we have another famous gal, right?
Yeah. We've got Anna Sorokin / Anna Delby. She kind of went by both names. She's the fake heiress who was convicted of theft and larceny in 2019. Now, she had a courtroom stylist who was actually pulling looks for her during her trial. So she came in these like neutral outfits and baby doll dresses, and she was showing up every day with these like thick, wide-rimmed black glasses. And this was intentional. Her lawyers thought showing up in a prison jumpsuit would make her look more guilty. So they had the stylist. But of course, this went a little too far once. She didn't like the look that was pulled for her one day, and as a result, refused to go to court. Of course, the judge was not cool with it, admonished it, and reminded her that this is a trial, not a fashion show.
So, Sophia, I actually had a problem with her look. She, first of all, with the jumpsuit, I mean, that raises a constitutional issue. The defendant is absolutely entitled to wear civilian clothing, even if they're incarcerated, for their trial, because it's very prejudicial to come in looking like a prisoner before a jury. So that part I take no issue with, actually. But the way that she was dressed, she was wearing these glasses and the baby doll dresses and the sort of nerdy look. She still, girlfriend still looked expensive. Those glasses and the baby doll dresses still looked like Prada, and she had ripped off a lot of people. So to me, that was a mistake. She's going on trial for massive fraud. I don't want her to look expensive. I want her to look like she, picked out some things from Ross or Marshalls or J. Crew, I thought she looked expensive, and I thought that just reinforced sort of who she was when she was engaged in the criminal conduct. Sophia, as always, you bring in the best context and the best insight. Now, turning to my panel for more on this, I have a very dear friend and someone who knows a thing or two about branding, rebranding, and making a fashion statement. We've got Adam Drawas, who's the owner of Walker Drawas, a brand marketing and publicity firm. And we have our digital journalist who's all about Diddy news this week. And if you've commented about this trial, guaranteed he's read it, okay? Justin Shepard from Just in the Nick of Crime. Thank you guys for joining me today. Adam, I want to go to you. What is the psychology behind dressing for a high-profile trial or situation with teams and fires that you're trying to put out and just trying to control the optics and the narrative?
Yeah, well, thank you, by the way, for having me. I think what we're seeing in some of these high-profile trials is using wardrobe and image as a way to skew or change or reinforce the messaging that's coming from that defendant. I think that what we're seeing in some situations with like Lindsay Lohan and even Winona Ryder in the 90s, when there were these high profile cases, they used these opportunities to dress a bit more demure, a little bit more elevated, very put together. So they're trying to send a message that they are put together in real life and that they are not guilty. But they also use it as an opportunity to create noise about fashion, making these statements. And so also bringing in a different narrative into the conversation around the trial and all this talk around, fashion. And so we saw that as well with ASAP Rocky and with Rihanna during his trial, where he used the opportunity to solely wear Saint Laurent the entire trial and really taking that opportunity to come correct in his wardrobe, but really using it as a way to elevate the situation. On the flip side of that, though, you have situations like Harvey Weinstein and what we're dealing with right now with Diddy, where you have people who are perceived in pop culture as egomaniacs, as big dogs in the industry. And so the world and the public know these people as being over the top with money, over the top with power. So they're using wardrobe in certain situations to make themselves more relatable, make themselves feel a little bit more humble. What we're seeing right now with Diddy and how he's been dressing and how his hair is now fully gray. Although we know that, circumstantially where he is in prison at the moment does not allow hair dye, I think that there's a part to be said here that he's trying to make himself feel or look optically a little bit more real, a little bit more scared, a little bit more relatable to both the jury and public as a whole.
I feel like I have my own Joan Rivers on the red carpet today. This is amazing. Let me ask you another question before I go to Justin. What do you think the defense strategy is that they've kept Diddy in the same outfit for 3 days? I mean, some of these jurors might be thinking like, this guy's stinky. Like, he needs to shower. He's wearing the same thing. What's the strategy there?
Well, I mean, I think that when we're looking at trials like, Paris Hilton and Lindsay Lohan and Winona Ryder, these are not as serious crimes as what Weinstein and Diddy are now going through. And so I think that there's an added level of desperation going on. And I think that right now, the opinion of Diddy is destroyed. I don't know if his image is repairable at this time. So I think some of it may actually be that he is mentally not well, and is really really has undone himself. But I also think it goes back to that tactic of, here's a billionaire with all the power in the world, with wearing flashy outfits on yachts. I think they're trying to make him look like he is desperate, like he is scared, that he is humble, that he is taking this
humble, yeah. And you brought up the gray. I've seen this happen in different trials, including, for example, I was on the Robert Blake case years ago, and he did have gray hair. He just used to dye it, and we're like, no, don't dye it, because I think the idea is you also, as a defense lawyer, you want to really make your client, the defendant, look unrecognizable as the guy that committed the crimes. In other words, distance them as much as possible from the person that's accused, So I think it's, really good strategy. Justin, Diddy's an icon, right? And do you think that this jury is somewhat intimidated when answering the judge's questions about some of their responses on the questionnaires? Because some of these responses are very personal and sensitive.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point, because I've been following that and watching the jurors' responses. And I think it would be incredibly intimidating when you realize, if you know who he is. We have seen some jurors who claim that they don't, or they've known little bits and pieces about him. But if you truly know who he is and what you're up against, that this is going to be a heck of a trial. This guy's life is on the line. It might be hard to put away these preconceived notions, but I don't see how you couldn't be intimidated on a trial like this with all the optics and who the subject is, who the defendant is.
And, it's interesting too, because typically most jurors want to get out of jury duty, but especially with a long trial, but these jurors are adamant about serving. And when they're asked follow-up questions about, well, you've heard about this, you know who he is, you know the whole story, you know the trial, can you set aside what you know? And they're like, oh yeah, they really don't want to get off this jury. And can you break down, Justin, who some of these potential jurors are? Like, is it too early to tell, or who's sort of making the cut?
Yeah. So here today we should know a final cut. That's the goal. Is that by Friday, May 9th, their goal is to have it cut down from the 45 that have moved forward to 12 and 6 alternates. That's the goal here. We know that some of the people that have been moved forward, one is a teacher, middle school teacher. There's people who like one of them, which I thought it was really kind of funny, described as like a Trekkie and a Star Wars nerd. That basically, like, he's been just binging Andorra, and it's just the weird way they've been describing some of these people. I've covered a lot of trials, that are pretty public. I've never seen jurors described like this with the play-by-play. And then there's another person who, struggles with more difficult words. They moved him forward. So there's really kind of people from all different walks of life, all different types of, jobs and things that they do throughout. Ages range from 30 to 75. So you really are kind of all across the board.
And, this is for both of you. This is obviously just a casual conversation. We're not actually seeing Diddy. Like, we don't have cameras in the courtroom, unfortunately, in this case, but we've seen these sketches of him. What are you guys taking away from what his appearance looks like?
I mean,
I'll go to you, Adam.
Yeah, I think that I view it as quite subjective because, these drawings, they can be misleading at times, for sure. I think that everyone is trying to get clarity on exactly what everything looks like and what is going on. Yesterday I read that, there was one of the potential jurors was pregnant, and Diddy checked in with her, like, how are you doing today? And it was a narrative that ran a little bit in press yesterday. And so, just to go also back to what you were saying previously about intimidation, I think sometimes the thing with Diddy is that he is this big charmer. And so I think that for me, I almost viewed him, putting on this show for these jurors as his own form of intimidation as well. But I don't think that looking at the sketches that I can decipher much. I think that people are trying to humanize him a little bit. But I do think that because of the subject matter and because of who it is people are starving for any kind of details or clarity of what is really going on.
Yeah. I agree. So can you impart anything, Justin?
Yeah. So first I want to say I wholeheartedly agree with what Adam said. Everything he said is accurate. And going back to the sketches, I've seen them. My followers enjoy seeing them. So I've been trying to post them as we get them. I don't think that they show him in any type of flattering light. But to kind of dovetail off of what Adam was saying a second ago, I agree. Diddy is this person who has been just a staple in the music industry, the hip hop industry for, going on 30 years now. And he knows how to work a room, he knows how to work people. I'm not somebody who can diagnose him, but you would almost say that he's got those narcissistic tendencies, which means that he knows how to manipulate people, manipulate the situation to get them to see him how they want them to see him. And I think that we're probably seeing a little bit of that as well.
But,
on the flip side, maybe
as the lawyer, yeah, and as the lawyer who sits next to individuals like him, I can tell you that, irrespective of that defendant's personality disorders like narcissism or whatever, the jury will check them out head to toe, every move they make, every look they give, everything they wear. I mean, they are really under, and we always say, do not look at the jury. Do not, just look down, take notes, talk to me. Don't look at the jury, but the jurors are staring them down. Mm-hmm. So looks do matter. I mean, they're not going to get you off. You're not going to get acquitted because of how different you look from the criminal in the trial. But they do matter. So Justin, my producer tells me that because you knew you were coming on Serving Justice today, that you actually took questions from your 1.7 million followers. So tell us, for Adam and I, Adam's the branding guru and I'm the lawyer. What do you got for us?
Well, let me start with Adam then, because there is a question about fashion predictions and things like that. So you probably are aware that the judge granted him 5 sweaters, 5 button downs, 5 pairs of pants, 2 pairs of shoes. What do you think that we're looking at for him as far as fashion predictions when the trial starts on Monday?
Well, it's going to be a strategic formula. I don't think we're going to be seeing him being curated by a designer or having a designer wanting to dress him in those configurations. I think we're going back to like real core basics of what are those staples that we need to do to control the narrative. And that might be a gray suit, a navy suit, a black suit. They're not going to be looking at any kind of colors or patterns that are going to lead to any kind of misconception of who he may have been or who he really is. I think that to go back to the talking to the jurors, I think they're trying to contain Diddy in his whole self. So not just his aesthetic, but also his behavior. He's a showman. He's got an ego. He is a narcissist. So the wardrobe and as little actions of letting that kind of egomaniac out is the key to a successful optics in this situation. It's going to be very simple. It's going to be very humble wardrobe. It's not going to read anything of flash. If it does, then I think that immediately the jurors are going to say, you really are that narcissistic monster and are guilty.
All right. Good to know that. Then my next question they had was regarding the opening statements. This is a pretty powerhouse legal team. Number one, on Diddy's side, but two, the prosecution is as well. What do you think we're looking at as far as opening statements go?
So opening statements are so important because people always think, well, it's about the closing argument, that wraps up the case, and that is very important. But opening statement is where you lay out for the jury what you can expect that this trial will show. And so for the defense, they're going to want to make an opening statement, a very strong one, that essentially says that the prosecution cannot meet its burden beyond a reasonable doubt, that Diddy sex trafficked anybody, that he was racketeering, that there was even a criminal enterprise. You got to remember, racketeering is typically a charge associated with mobsters. Now, we saw it play out with a musician like R. Kelly. So again, it's this is what prosecutors use as their wild card to charge people with RICO violations. But this is it's only been in recent times that we've seen the RICO statute applied to a music enterprise. So I think the defense is going to dismantle, or at least make a statement that the idea of a criminal enterprise does not exist, that there was no sex trafficking, and that the government's not going to be able to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. On the flip side, of course, the government's going to come in making promises about what their witnesses are going to testify to, about what the evidence will show this jury. And so what I always say, even to my colleagues, is when you make an opening statement, take it very seriously, because those promises that you're making to the jury, you have to live up to them. If you tell them this case is going to prove that blah, 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 and that evidence doesn't come, you lose credibility. So it's very, very important. I'm looking forward to seeing what each side presents on Monday.
Yeah, I am too. It's going to be interesting for sure.
Thank you to my amazing panel, and thank you, our viewers. Thank you for tuning in. And I want to hear from you. Please engage with us. Let us know what you think. What do you expect will happen in Diddy's trial as things heat up? What do you want for it to happen in Diddy's trial? Please engage, comment. We would like to hear from you, and please join us next time. Until next time, the defense rests.